During the Second World War, the sky became a vital battleground, making legends of planes like the Spitfire. But by the late 40s, the war was over, and a new age in aviation was beginning. The jet age was here, and work began on new aircraft that could handle the awesome speeds these machines were capable of. To test the latest developments and learn more about the challenges of jet technology, British company Supermarine built their plane, the Swift. In the history of fighter jets, the Swift is far from fondly remembered, but I wanted to find out, was it really as bad as people say?
People had played around with swept-wing fighters, or swept-wing aircraft, even before the First World War. But they never had the speed in those aircraft. So they played with flying wings and things like this, and they understood swept-wing technology. It was the power of the jet engine which gave you almost unlimited speed, which they couldn't get beyond with straight wing. So having the Swift and the Supermarine swept-wing technology, which other people were playing with, but the Swift being the first swept-wing fighter in the RAF, was that pioneer.
So by 1950, Britain had become involved in the Korean War, and a new kind of fighter plane was required to face a new kind of enemy. Now the Swift wasn't originally intended for war at all. Actually, it was a test plane in order to test swept-wing technology, which was a kind of wing developed in order to keep up with the speeds that could be attained with the new jet engines. But the pressure was on to find a new fighter jet, and in no time at all, the Swift entered its first war.
The guys at Supermarine said, you're wasting your time, it's not built for this, we need to either start again, and the government said, no, we have to have a fighter jet now. So the F-1 and the F-2 were the first attempts by Swift to meet government demand to produce a fighter with 4 guns in the nose or underneath the cockpit, and it should have been able to fight at 40,000 feet, but actually couldn't. Immediately with the first 2 prototypes, they found that at height, at 25, 30, 40,000 feet, if they fired the guns or anything like that, it would just flip on its back. It would take 9 minutes or something to do a 360-degree turn. So it had no characteristics of a jet fighter at all. It was a useless fighter plane, absolutely useless as a fighter plane. The Hunter had the same problem. The F-86 had the same problem. The MiG-15 had the same problem. But in Russia, they had unlimited funds to overcome that. The Americans the same with the F-86, and the Hunter was behind the Swift. So the Swift, because of politics more than anything else and money, they never had the money to develop the Swift, and the body was wrong. You know, the body was this fat body for the centrifugal motor. It was purely built as an experimental plane, and it was forced into service as a service jet, and that's really its problem.
So after being sent into action, the Swift failed to hold its own as a fighter jet. But does that mean it deserves such a negative reputation? As a poorly funded experimental craft forced into a combat environment, the Swift was something of a square peg in a round hole, so I want to know where its strengths could be found.
So somebody came up with the bright idea of turning the Swift into a reconnaissance aircraft. So they fitted 3 cameras into the nose, and it became a great reconnaissance aircraft. I spoke to 4 or 5 pilots who were all reconnaissance pilots. They were flying at 50 feet at somewhere in the region of 450 knots, which, you know, is quite incredible. You won't see guys flying at that height these days. And they all of them said it was just a really stable aircraft. Yeah, they could drop the map and lean down and pick the map up and still be okay. If they did that in a Hunter, they would be in the ground because the Hunter was really so responsive to controls. So they loved the Swift. There were a couple of incidents where guys got so low that they hit trees and they got back in their Swift because it was built ruggedly. It was really ruggedly built. So the F4 actually held a world record for about four days, 737.3 miles per hour, which is something like 1,180 kilometers, something like that. They broke the record in Tunisia, and within about 3 or 4 days, the Americans had rebroken the record. But it was a record breaker.
It seems that when playing to its strengths, the Swift really came into its own, and its role as a pioneer in the early years of the jet age meant its real value may be found not in what it achieved, but in what we were able to learn from it.
So if you look all the jet fighters are swept wing, except something like the A-10 tank buster, but all aircraft are swept wings. Your Boeing 747s have a swept wing. Every single aircraft has a swept wing. You know, if you compare it to a Comet, and you have a look at an A320, it's got a sweep on the wing. So it was significant, and I think everybody was playing with afterburners as well. They'd got it right, and it was again the first one in RAF service with afterburners. The Americans had these kind of things as well, but it was a first in British service. And I think then the variable incidence tailplane was significant, because you still see it today. There were other people playing with it, but the Swift was the first one which actually flew with a variable incidence. So its legacy is there. The dogtooth wing you'll see that on so many fighters. Again, first with the Swift. Those are the things that are there. They learnt an immense amount from the Swift. Supermarine did, and generally British aviation did. So yeah, there's a legacy.
So from what I've been able to learn about the Swift, I can understand why people didn't like it at first, if they considered it as a jet fighter, which it was never really intended to be. What it was is an experimental craft intended to help develop jet technology, and in that endeavour, it has a legacy in modern flight that can be seen in the skies to this day. And looking back, that's where the Swift's real strength was. Was it a great fighter jet? Not really, but it certainly wasn't the worst jet in the world.